Rain fell relentlessly over Manila that Sunday afternoon. The streets, normally filled with vendors and the incessant noise of motorcycles, were strangely silent. Only the sound of raindrops hitting against building windows broke the silence. It was an important day for the Philippines. The day when Manny Pacquiao, the pride of the nation, would return after his recent fight in the United States. At Ninoy Aquino International Airport, a crowd formed despite the rain. People of all ages huddled under colorful umbrellas, some holding improvised posters covered with plastic to protect them from the downpour. The name, Pac-Man, echoed like a mantra among the anxious crowd, a demonstration of the unconditional love Filipinos nurtured for their national hero. Meanwhile, in the studios of Manila's largest broadcaster, producers rushed to finalize preparations for the live transmission. The exclusive interview with Manny Pacquiao would be the highlight of Sunday's programming. Cameras were positioned, microphones repeatedly tested. The news director walked nervously, checking every detail with obsessive precision. Rafael Moreno adjusted his tie in front of the mirror in his dressing room. At 35, he was considered the rising star of Filipino journalism. Educated in the United States with impeccable English, Rafael had built his reputation as the sharpest and most relentless interviewer on Filipino television. His Sunday program had led the ratings for more than 2 years, thanks to his direct and often controversial style. That morning, Rafael had woken up in a particularly acidic mood. The email from the network confirming that he would share the interview with Maricel Santos, the host of the morning show, had ruined his plans. Rafael considered Maricel a second-rate journalist, someone who had earned her place at the station more because of her appearance than her talent. The idea of sharing the spotlight with her deeply irritated him. As he finished preparing, Rafael looked disdainfully at the headlines in the newspapers about the boxer. Pacquiao returns as national hero. Filipino pride conquers another victory. For Rafael, that adoration bordered on ridiculous. Although he didn't deny Pacquiao's talent in the ring, the journalist secretly despised what he considered the fighter's lack of refinement, especially his heavily accented English and humble origins. The plane landed at 3:43 p.m., almost 2 hours late due to weather conditions. In the airport's VIP lounge, Manny Pacquiao tried to rest after the long flight from Los Angeles. At 42, his face showed the signs of a career of punches and sacrifices. The marks under his eyes told stories of epic fights, of falls and overcoming. Dressed simply, jeans, white t-shirt, and a discreet cap, nothing about him suggested the multimillionaire status and global icon he had become. Manny observed through the window the crowd forming even under the storm. A mixture of gratitude and weight of responsibility invaded him. Each Filipino out there represented a story of struggle similar to his own. The fight against poverty, against oblivion, against a system that often ignored the humblest. He knew he wasn't just a boxer. He was a symbol of hope for millions. In his mind, memories of General Santos City, his hometown, mingled with recent images from the ring in Las Vegas. He remembered when he slept on the streets, selling cigarettes to survive, dreaming of a better future. That hungry boy would never have imagined that one day he would be received as a national hero, that his face would adorn billboards, and that his fights would paralyze the entire country. In the studio, nervousness grew with the delay of Pacquiao's arrival. Rafael drummed his fingers impatiently on the meeting table, while producers tried to reorganize the programming. Maricel, on the other hand, maintained her calm, reviewing her notes and occasionally checking her makeup. Her tranquility only increased Rafael's irritation. When they finally announced that Pacquiao's entourage had left the airport heading to the studio, Rafael went to the main set. The lights were adjusted. The teleprompter tested one last time. The journalist mentally rehearsed the questions he would ask, carefully planning how he would conduct the interview to dominate speaking time, leaving Maricel in the background. At 5:15 p.m., Manny Pacquiao entered the broadcasting building, accompanied by a small team of advisors and security guards. Even exhausted from the trip, he greeted each employee along the way with a genuine smile and words of thanks. Behind the scenes, technicians and producers briefly interrupted their tasks to shake the idol's hand or take a quick photo. In the waiting room adjacent to the studio, a young production assistant offered water and coffee to Pacquiao. With hands trembling from nervousness, she accidentally spilled a few drops on the floor. Embarrassed, she began to apologize repeatedly, fearing losing her job for her lack of professionalism. To her surprise, Manny immediately stooped down, grabbed a napkin, and helped clean the floor, gently saying that accidents happen to everyone. That small gesture didn't go unnoticed by Maricel, who observed from the door. The journalist smiled, confirming what she had always heard about the boxer's humility. She approached to greet him, introducing herself with respect and briefly explaining how the interview would be conducted. Manny listened attentively, thanking her for the opportunity to speak directly to the Filipino people. Meanwhile, Rafael received the final touches of makeup, impatient to start the broadcast. When Pacquiao finally entered the studio, the journalist offered a formal greeting, notably colder than the warm embrace Maricel had given the boxer. The cameras were positioned, the microphones adjusted, and the director announced they would be on air in 30 seconds. The program's vignette echoed through the studio, the lights intensified, and Rafael assumed his professional posture before the cameras. With his deep and articulate voice, he presented the special program, emphasizing the exclusivity of the interview. Beside him, Maricel smiled serenely, while Manny Pacquiao, seated between the two presenters, maintained a respectful and attentive posture. The first minutes passed without incident. Rafael conducted questions about the recent fight, technical strategies, and the next challenges in the boxer's career. Manny responded with his characteristic humility, frequently mentioning his faith and gratitude to the Filipino people. Maricel complimented with questions about family and social projects maintained by the athlete. Approximately 20 minutes after the broadcast began, the atmosphere in the studio began to change. Rafael, visibly displeased with the direction of the conversation, which highlighted humanitarian and personal aspects of Pacquiao's life instead of generating controversy, decided to change his approach. Interrupting the boxer's response about his philanthropic work, the journalist launched a question about politics, an area where Pacquiao had recently faced criticism for some controversial statements. The abrupt change of topic caught Manny by surprise, but he began to respond with the same sincerity. That's when Rafael committed the mistake that would change the course of his career. As Pacquiao explained his viewpoint, with his characteristic Filipino accent while speaking English, the journalist let escape a sarcastic smile, followed by an almost imperceptible imitation of the boxer's accent. The gesture lasted only a few seconds, but was captured by the cameras. Maricel widened her eyes, shocked by her colleague's lack of professionalism. The technicians backstage exchanged looks of disbelief. However, the most surprising was that Manny Pacquiao, accustomed to observing the slightest movements of his opponents in the ring, immediately noticed the mockery. For a brief moment, silence took over the studio. Manny interrupted his response, his eyes fixed on Rafael. There was no anger in his gaze, only a deep sadness mixed with disappointment. The boxer who had faced the most feared adversaries in rings around the world suddenly seemed vulnerable in the face of that act of disrespect. Rafael, realizing too late his mistake, tried to regain control of the situation with a different question, pretending nothing had happened. But the damage was done. Behind the scenes, the program director was already receiving the first messages from the network management, alerting about the repercussion on social media. The moment of disrespect had been captured by attentive viewers, who were already sharing the video with indignant comments. Maricel, demonstrating exceptional professionalism, tried to soften the moment, directing Manny a question about his inspirations in life. The boxer, recovering his composure, breathed deeply before responding. What came next surprised everyone present and the millions of Filipinos watching the live broadcast. With a calm but firm voice, Manny began speaking about his childhood in extreme poverty, about how he slept on the streets and went hungry. He described how he learned English by himself, listening to songs and watching interviews with other boxers, always dreaming of one day representing his country with dignity. He spoke about the pride he felt in his accent, as it carried the mark of his journey, of his roots, of his people's struggle. Without directly mentioning the incident, Manny looked into Rafael's eyes and spoke about respect, about how he had learned in boxing that a true champion is not measured only by his victories, but by his conduct inside and outside the ring. He commented how arrogance often precedes the fall, and how humility opens doors that pride could never open. His words, spoken without any tone of accusation, fell like a weight on Rafael. The journalist, known for his eloquence, now found himself without words, aware of the monumental mistake he had made. With each phrase from Pacquiao, Rafael's countenance showed increasing discomfort, while Maricel struggled to contain the emotion before the powerful speech. In the final minutes of the interview, Manny spoke directly to young Filipinos, encouraging them to pursue their dreams despite obstacles, to preserve their cultural identity even as they conquer the world. He emphasized that true success is not in medals, titles, or money, but in the ability to elevate those around you, to represent your origins with dignity. When the cameras finally cut to a commercial break, the studio remained silent for a few seconds. The technical team, normally agitated during breaks, remained motionless, as if still processing what they had just witnessed. Rafael rose hastily, avoiding looking at anyone, and headed to his dressing room without saying a word. Maricel approached Manny, shaking his hand with genuine admiration. Behind the scenes, the program director was already receiving preliminary audience numbers. The interview had become the most watched program of the year, with millions of Filipinos following live on television and the internet. Meanwhile, Rafael sat alone in his dressing room, facing his reflection in the mirror. The cell phone beside him wouldn't stop vibrating with notifications, messages from colleagues, from the network management, comments on social media. His attitude had generated a wave of national indignation. In a matter of minutes, his name became one of the most commented topics online, with videos of the moment of mockery being shared thousands of times. The second part of the interview would be conducted only by Maricel. The network's decision came quickly, in an attempt to contain damage to its image. Rafael was informed that he should leave the studio immediately, and that a meeting would be scheduled for the next day to discuss his future at the company. As Rafael packed his belongings, a cleaning employee worked silently in the adjacent corridor. He was a middle-aged man, with features that resembled Pacquiao's, the same type of face that Rafael secretly despised, that he considered inferior. The employee, noticing the journalist hastily leaving, offered a polite smile, holding the door for him to pass. That small gesture of kindness, coming from someone Rafael would normally not even notice, provoked a sudden realization. Behind his professional success, his perfect English, and his sophisticated appearance, he had lost something essential: the ability to see value in people beyond appearances, to recognize the dignity present in life stories different from his own. In the following days, the interview became a landmark moment in Filipino television history. Clips of Pacquiao's speech were shared not only in the Philippines but internationally. Foreign journalists praised the boxer's dignified posture in the face of disrespect, while educators used the incident to discuss linguistic and cultural prejudice in schools. For Rafael, the consequences were immediate and severe. The network, pressured by the public and advertisers, decided on his permanent removal. Offers from other channels, which would normally quickly emerge for a journalist of his caliber, did not appear. His name became associated with that moment of disrespect, and doors previously open now closed. Isolated in his luxurious apartment, Raphael repeatedly watched the recording of the interview, noticing nuances he hadn't noticed during the live broadcast. Pacquiao's dignity, the absence of anger or desire for revenge in his words, the way he transformed a moment of humiliation into a powerful lesson. All this deeply affected him now. 2 weeks after the incident, Raphael made a decision that surprised everyone who knew him. He wrote an open letter, published in the country's main newspapers, acknowledging his mistake and apologizing not only to Manny Pacquiao but to all Filipinos who felt diminished by his attitude. In the letter, he honestly reflected on the ingrained prejudice that had guided his behavior and announced that he would step away from the media to relearn values he had forgotten. The letter generated mixed reactions. Many saw it as a strategy to regain popularity, others as a sincere first step toward redemption. Manny Pacquiao, questioned about the matter at a charity event, limited himself to saying that he accepted the apologies and wished the best for the journalist, demonstrating once again the greatness of character that had made him beloved by his nation. The real test for Raphael would come in the following weeks. Fulfilling what he promised in his letter, he began to work as a volunteer in a social project in the outskirts of Manila, the same project that Pacquiao had mentioned during the fateful interview. Initially received with distrust, Raphael humbly dedicated himself to the simplest tasks, organizing donations, painting walls of the community school, helping children with reading difficulties. Gradually, away from the spotlights and glamour of television, Raphael began to rediscover parts of himself that he had lost in his professional ascent. In the stories of the project's children, many dreaming of being like Pacquiao, he found a mirror for his own journey, remembering his initial dreams as a journalist. Not of fame or status, but of telling stories that mattered, of giving voice to those who were not heard. 6 months after the incident, fate provided an unexpected encounter. During a charity event organized by Pacquiao's foundation to inaugurate a community sports center, Raphael was among the volunteers working behind the scenes. When Manny arrived for the ceremony, the two met face to face in a quiet corridor, away from the cameras. There were no great speeches or dramatic moments. Just two men, each carrying their own struggles and learnings. Raphael, visibly nervous, extended his hand in a gesture of respect. Manny, with the same simplicity that characterized all his actions, accepted the greeting, adding a brief embrace that spoke more than 1,000 words. In that silent embrace was contained a lesson that transcended boxing, journalism, or any profession. True greatness is not in never falling, but in the courage to get up and start again, recognizing one's own mistakes and seeking a better path. It was a lesson that Manny had learned in boxing rings around the world, and that now Raphael learned in the most challenging ring of all, that of real life. In the following weeks, a new story began to circulate on Filipino social media and newspapers. It wasn't about a boxing champion or a disgraced journalist, but about an innovative educational project in Manila's poorest communities. The project, which taught communication and media skills to disadvantaged youth, had two unlikely mentors working side by side, former presenter Rafael Moreno and members of Manny Pacquiao's foundation team. The cameras that once captured the moment of disrespect now recorded something completely different. Rafael, with sleeves rolled up and without his famous silk tie, teaching young Filipinos to tell their own stories through basic filming equipment donated by Pacquiao's foundation. The program quickly gained notoriety, not only for bringing together two figures so controversially connected, but for the impressive results. Short documentaries produced by students began to gain recognition in international festivals, bringing to light genuine stories from the Philippines rarely shown in conventional media. On a rainy afternoon, similar to the one that had started this entire journey, Raphael proudly watched the final presentation of his students' projects. Among the audience, discreetly seated in the last row, was Manny Pacquiao, who had made a point of honoring the event without prior announcements so as not to overshadow the achievements of the young filmmakers. When the last documentary was shown, a powerful narrative about a young cigarette seller in the streets of Manila who dreamed of being a boxer. An emotional silence took over the improvised auditorium. The final images showed the young protagonist training in the rain, repeating to himself a phrase that Pacquiao had said in an interview. "Accent doesn't define your intelligence. Your persistence defines your destiny." Rafael and Manny exchanged a glance across the darkened auditorium. They didn't need words to communicate what both felt, that from the ashes of what could have been just another media scandal, something significant had been born, something that transformed real lives. At the event's exit, reporters anxiously waited, hoping to capture some interaction between the boxer and the former journalist. To their surprise, both left together, side by side, without glamour or announcements, conversing like two ordinary Filipinos united by a purpose greater than their differences or their past. A young reporter, newly graduated and clearly nervous, timidly approached, asking for a statement. Rafael gently stepped back, encouraging Manny to speak. The boxer, with his unmistakable accent and his habitual humility, summarized in few words a journey that had impacted an entire nation. In the Philippines, we are not defined by our falls, but by how we rise after them. Each accent tells a story of overcoming. Each mistake can be the beginning of something extraordinary. As the rain fell softly over Manila, those words echoed beyond cameras and microphones, beyond sensationalist headlines and social networks. They reached the heart of what made the Philippines a resilient nation, the ability to transform adversity into strength, to find dignity even in the most challenging circumstances, and to recognize that true victories rarely happen under spotlights, but in the silent moments of personal transformation. Rafael Moreno, the man who had once mocked an accent, now deeply understood its value. In each inflection, in each word pronounced differently from the standard he so valued, there was a story of struggle, adaptation, courage. The same accent he had ridiculed carried the echo of the streets of General Santos City, of hunger overcome, of dreams pursued against all odds. It was the authentic voice of a champion, not just of boxing, but of life. And for millions of Filipinos watching in their homes, the image of those two men walking together in the rain, a fallen ex-journalist and a multimillionaire boxer, became a powerful reminder that even the most shameful moments can be the first step in a journey of redemption. That a mistake doesn't need to define an entire life. And that, sometimes, the true champion is not the one who never falls, but the one who helps others to rise. If you like this kind of story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next videos.